Welcome to our study called Fearless Marriage. During this course of 4 episodes, we wanted to try and help us have marriages that are fearless, that maybe if you're young and you're not even married yet, that the things we will discover that Jesus wrote in His scriptures will help you to not be fearful headed into marriage because of what you've seen around our culture and even within the church, some of which we will talk about. So I'm excited to dive into episode 1 with you, which is called Fix Your Focus. And during this whole entire 4 episodes, we will be in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5. And so we're going to spend the entire time there. So if you want to read Ephesians 5 and become familiar with it, it'll really help you as we take this fearless marriage journey together. Jennifer Smith has one of my favorite quotes on marriage, and she says this: marriage is a mosaic you build with your spouse. Millions of tiny moments that create your love story. I think that's so fantastic that marriage is a mosaic, and what happens is it's not built by just a wedding, it's not built by one vacation, it's not built by one fight at home or one argument or one mistake. It is built by millions of tiny moments, and they all come together, and what you call that is your love story. Now, with the divorce rate at 50% or above, both inside and outside the church, young people are beginning to fear marriage in a growing number. There's actually studies that are showing young people are starting to look at their parents and they're starting to look at society and say, man, why should we do that? There are becoming less and less examples for our children of marriages that shouldn't make them fearful. They have every reason to be fearful as they look at things crumble around them. Most of what they are witnessing is so far short of a love story that the mosaic they see is filled with stress, anger, abuse, distance, unforgiveness, and a drastic lack of faithfulness. What our children are seeing, and unfortunately it's inside the church just as much as it's outside, is the mosaic that they see is not a mosaic of a million tiny moments that add up to a love story. It's a mosaic of millions of tiny moments that add up to destruction, separation, and eventual divorce. The worst part for followers of Jesus is that marriage was meant to picture the love of Jesus. That when our children or when we look at a marriage that is supposed to be centered around Christ, what we were supposed to see was this love story, not just between the couple, but also the love story of God. Marriage was meant to display service, sacrifice, humility, kindness, patience, and be the greatest display of love that Jesus has for His church. Sadly, these pictures are far and few between in our culture and within the church. So, it begs a few questions. Can we still create a love story? Can we have what Jennifer Smith said? A mosaic of millions of tiny moments that make up a love story. Can marriage become fearless once again? Could we enter into marriage as young people? Could we go at marriage from a fearless place, really believing that God can rewrite your story or take your story that's just starting and make it into this love story? Can marriage be the picture Jesus had in mind when He created it thousands of years ago? You see, I didn't make marriage, and America didn't make marriage. God made marriage. God created man and woman, and He put them together in holy matrimony. He made them one flesh, and He designed them to be fruitful and multiply and love Him and then love one another. And the answer to all 3 of these questions is yes. Of course it can be. And if it couldn't, we wouldn't even be here. But I believe that marriage can be fearless once again. I believe that you can create a love story. And this will be the focus of this 4-part series that we are calling Fearless Marriage. So let's begin by doing some renovation on ourselves. What marriage needs is a fresh and fixed focus. We need to fix some things. We need to fix some perspectives we have, and even some perspectives we have on ourselves that will help our marriages become fearless and a beautiful love story. The fix number one we need, and we're going to see it from Ephesians chapter 5, is we need to empty ourselves. You need to empty yourself. The key to any marriage that is centered around Jesus, that is a beautiful love story, that is a million tiny moments that all come together for a beautiful display of love, is us emptying ourselves. In Ephesians chapter 5, he starts off by saying, "Therefore, be imitators of God, as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." He tells us, as he's going to talk about marriage later in the chapter, that where we need to start, if we want to fix this problem of marriage, is we need to start by beginning to imitate God. That one of the major problems in all of our marriages is we have two individuals who aren't walking in love, as he says in verse 2. He tells us to walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. In Philippians chapter 2, it describes Jesus when he was here on the planet. And I want you to notice what he says about Jesus that needs to become true of us. He says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit." Imagine right there, if that little half a sentence was true in marriages today. That if each partner was doing nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, that everything they did wasn't about them, how much of that 50% would go away? He goes on and says, "But in humility count others more significant than yourselves." We're going to look at this a lot more in this 4-part series, that one of the keys to fearless marriage is lifting up, exalting, serving, submitting to the other person. He says, "Let each of you look not only on his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who," and now he's going to describe Jesus, "though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself." The King of the universe emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. That word servant there is a literally translated slave. He emptied himself of everything that he was as God. And he took on a form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. There are two great things missing from marriages, especially Christian marriages today. Two big ones. Number one is this: individuals are focused on being with or being like Jesus. Individuals aren't focused on being with or being like Jesus. Remember what he said in Ephesians 5, verse 1. "Be imitators of God and walk in love." I want you to be with Jesus and be like Jesus. And one of the key things that is missing from marriages today are two people who are focused on being with Jesus. That you have your own personal, intimate time with Jesus, and then you are leaving that time and living and becoming like Jesus. And number two that's missing from our marriages, we are full of self instead of empty of self. Take any marriage that is crumbling apart. Take any marriage that is struggling relationally. Take any marriage that is not connecting, is not working, and I will show you a marriage that is full of self. It just has to be. That any time in my marriage that we have an issue or we have a struggle or we have an argument, it's almost always because I'm being selfish. It's almost always because one of us is being selfish, that we are thinking about ourselves instead of loving and caring and putting the other person above our own selves. You see, Jesus did nothing for selfish gain. Jesus was not focused on his own interest. Jesus emptied himself of everything. Jesus was the kindest and most humble king ever. And that's missing from our marriages today. I have yet to see or hear about a broken marriage and the couple is feasting, panting, seeking, and communing with Jesus on a daily basis, individually and together. Not a single one. I've just never heard of a marriage that is really struggling and really falling apart, and people are going in separate directions, and at the same time they are feasting and panting and seeking and communing with Jesus. The two things just don't go together. That when selfishness reigns, it puts an incredible strain on a marriage, because marriage was designed to be about one person serving another and that person serving right back. Ask yourself, if you're having trouble in your marriage, is the problem in my marriage, or is the problem my lack, complacency, passive daily relationship with Jesus? Maybe you're having a hard time and you just step back and look and say, man, how's my relationship with God? Am I spending time with him? Even if your spouse isn't. Am I spending time with Jesus? Am I not lacking in that area, but I'm being intimate with him? Am I feasting on God? Am I panting for God? Am I seeking communion with Jesus on a daily basis? And then ask, maybe that's one of the problems, is that in our marriage, Jesus is not center. And in my life, Jesus is not center. And we need to fix that problem. The second thing we need to fix is we have to walk differently. What is needed more now than ever are married couples who decide to walk differently, to fight for purity, to desire an inheritance in God's kingdom, not this earth's kingdom. We need couples who refuse to partner with what this world says is acceptable. Husbands and wives who decide together, we will be unafraid of marriage because we live our lives as children of light and the Most High God. I want you to check out what he says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 3. And he's getting ready to talk about marriage. He's getting ready to talk about husbands and wives. And he says, but sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not be named among you. It must not be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor crude joking, which are out of place for believers. But instead, let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them. For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. You see, the world will tell us that pornography is okay. They'll tell us that looking at things on social media is okay. They will tell us texting a girl or man that we work with and getting a little too intimate, it's okay as long as you don't cross the line. They will tell you that thinking about other women, other men, even in the bedroom is okay. Do whatever it takes. And the world is lying to us. And what the God of the universe says is, man, we need to walk differently. We have to know, gentlemen, that our own purity affects our relationship with our spouse. And that, ladies, it is exactly the same. Matter of fact, look at Proverbs chapter 5 with me, if you will, and look what it says about this relationship between man and woman. It says, drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. You can look right into that and say, man, you have a spouse. Drink water from there. Don't go next door. Don't go to the secretary. Don't go to the coworker. Don't go to the trainer at your gym. He says, man, drink water out of your own cistern. He says, should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice, check this out, in the wife of your youth. A lovely deer, a graceful doe. He even gets very descriptive and intimate. He says, let her breast fill you at all times with delight, and be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? Simple question. Husbands and wives, does your spouse still intoxicate you? Do you still get intoxicated with your wife? Are you still intoxicated with your husband? You see, because if your answer is no, that's a you problem, not a them problem. And you will never have a fearless marriage unless you fix the focus and fix the problem. Now let me give you a tip. The more I am intoxicated with Jesus, the more intoxicated I become with Jenna. It's just a fact. The more intoxicated I am with Jesus, the more I am so delighted in the wife of my youth. I am intoxicated always in her love, and I don't want another cistern. I don't want another spring. I don't need another thing, because I'm in love with him and I'm in love with what he has given me, this beautiful, spotless, perfect bride that he's entrusted me with, and lets me be intimate with, and lets me have a relationship with. You see, we look at marriage and we try and fix our partner. And what God wants to do oftentimes is just fix us first, and us realize the problem might be us. Fix number 3 is we need to become a Jesus pleaser. For many of you, and I know a lot of people that are this way, you're people pleaser. Making people happy makes you happy. And some of that's really healthy and some of that's really not. But he says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 10, he says, here's what I want you to do as far as pleasure. Try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. What our marriages need desperately is we need to get back to saying, how do I please the Lord as a husband? How do I please the Lord as a wife? How do I make God happy in this role? Ask yourself on the way home from work today, what can I do to please the Lord by serving my spouse? What can I do? It's that simple. You're going to go home. You want to exalt them above your own self. You want her or him to be the just thing and person that you're intoxicated with. And so as you head home, and I know maybe you go home and you're tired and you want to fall on the couch, or you just want to just have me time, and what your wife or husband needs is for you to go home and say, what can I do to please the Lord by serving my spouse? It'll be a game changer in your marriage. Your wife or husband won't even know what to do. As you walk in and you say, I am here to please Jesus, and the way I please Jesus is by serving you, by being selfless, by fixing my focus. Fix number 4, this is the last one. Don't be passive. There is 2 major places I think you can be passive and it be incredibly dangerous. And that's in your marriage, and that's in your parenting. You cannot let those relationships just happen. He says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14, he says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. He tells us, wake up, get up, rise up, take ownership of your marriage, take ownership of your family, and say, I am going to fix it. I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to be purposeful about it. I'm going to come home with intentionality. I'm going to date my wife or date my husband. I'm going to love them. I'm going to do whatever it takes to renew my soul and become intoxicated with them Again, I love what Nicholas Sparks says, right? I mean, so many people love Nicholas Sparks, love his books, movies done about them. He says this, so it's not going to be easy. And I can tell you, we've got 3 more episodes of this series. And it doesn't get easier. Marriage can be hard. Fixing marriage can be even harder. Being steadfast in marriage, incredibly hard. It's not going to be easy, but you can't be passive about it. He says it's going to be really hard. We're going to have to work at this every day, but I want to do that because I want you. I want all of you, forever, every day. You and me, every day. It's pretty well written by Nicholas Sparks. And I want to encourage you. Maybe the place to start, if you're struggling in marriage, if you're winning in marriage, maybe take that quote home. Sit down with your spouse and just confess it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to do a lot of work to have a fearless, Jesus-centered marriage. But I want to do it because I want you. And I want our relationship to be a testimony to children, to our culture, and to a church of the love Jesus has for us. I want to encourage you as we step into the next episodes. It's not going to get easier. This passage in Ephesians 5 is very challenging. But I promise you, God wants to do something supernatural in one of the most important relationships you have. I hope you'll keep going on to episode 2.